What's going on, guys? And welcome back to another episode of the Met Central podcast. As unfortunately, I will be flying solo today on this one since my co host Matt, who's usually with me, is unfortunately dealing with some personal stuff in his life right now. So, yeah, I'm not going to get into detail with that just because. But either way, I will be here by myself doing this live stream because there's still so much to talk about in Metsland to where I I have to talk about it. I mean, there's just so much right now where I was gonna maybe wait for the next episode that we could do together, but we're just gonna push it back for next week, him and I doing a show together. But for today, we are going to obviously discuss a lot of big topics because Pat Ragazzo just dropped an article a couple minutes ago, maybe an hour ago at this point. But either way, some news in there that is noteworthy. There is interest in certain starting pitchers. And then, of course, ever since we did the last podcast, they added Jesse Winker back. They brought Ryan Stanek back, added AJ Minter to the bullpen. So there's a lot to discuss here. So this is going to be a long episode, probably going to be a jam-packed episode, but we're going to dive into all of it. Before I jump into everything, please be sure to leave a like on your way into the live stream. Subscribe if you guys are new to the channel. Even if you're watching on replay, leave a like. Why not? And turn on your notifications so you know when we upload or go live here on Met Central. But I'm trying to think of where to start because, like I said, there's just a lot to dissect here to where I really don't know. You could start obviously with the big topic here, that being Pete Alonso, considering the fact that it took up a bulk of the conversation yesterday. If you guys missed the live stream that I did with Carson of Mets Weekly, go check that out on my channel. Go check their channel out as well. Mets Weekly, that is, like I said. And we were discussing the Ryan Stanek signing. Like, that was what we went live for. And a bulk of the conversation ended up being Pete Alonso because of the fact that it is the talk of the town right now, considering you got Brett Beatty sliding probably at third base right now. And then Vientos is going to have to move the first. And it leaves all of us in a pickle here of where does this team go if they don't bring back Pete Alonso, because there has to be a plan B. And it looks like that maybe there is a couple of options here. We talked about at nauseum yesterday Spencer Torkelson and Ryan Mountcastle, but there was also a report, and I think it was in the Pat Ragazzo article, I could be wrong there, that the Mets did offer Mark Canha a contract, which that could be someone that they are viewing potentially to play first base. Do I love that? No, I would really hope, and the way that I would like to see it is if they are going to bring Mark Canha back, that is because Starling Marte is getting moved in a deal to San Diego to where they get a starting pitcher. And we'll get into that conversation later just because that's a whole different thing. That's the only way, though, I'm okay with Mark Canha coming back personally, is if they're going the route of he's going to be here because Starling Marte is gone and we need another right-handed bat that could play the outfield. That would at least make some sense there. But even then, a little confused because wouldn't you rather get someone that's more of the DH profile that could hit for a little more power? Because how many times have we talked about that as well? But I get that maybe they do see a little bit of value there to the fact that he could at least play the field. But that all of that does not lead into, or that steers away, I should say, from the main topic at hand here with Pete Alonso to an extent, because like I said, maybe they do view him as an option to play first base. But if it's not Pete Alonso, the guy that I would still want the most is Ryan Mountcastle. And I get that he's not anything special. And I get that's not the sexy option. But like I talked about yesterday with Carson in our discussion, it might not be a sexy name. And it sucks for, on paper and going into the year with high expectations, but it might just be that way because of the fact that, again, Pete Alonso, they cannot keep playing this game with him. And that's really what it comes down to there, because how long are they going to wait around for him to make a decision? And in the words of John Heyman, the Boris puppet himself, apparently Pete Alonso is desperate to return to the Mets. If he's truly desperate to return to the Mets, then there's zero reason for the Mets to up their offer. There's zero reason. And like I mentioned yesterday as well, if there was truly some market for Pete Alonso, because all I'm hearing online is Steve Cohen's cheap. David Stearns is a fraud. Both of them are being cheap about this. If there was truly a market for Pete Alonso, they would not lose out on getting Pete Alonso back. The thing is though, like we brought up yesterday, there is no market for Pete Alonso. There is no market for Alex Bregman. That is why they're not signed yet. There's no market for either of these guys. So I don't understand that whole conversation still. But to me, like I said yesterday, if they are really going to go the route of Pete Alonso, then a decision better be done soon because the Mets have a lot of work to do if that's not the case, because they have to go out and get a first baseman. Pat Ragazzo mentioned in the article that they're still targeting a starting pitcher. And if they do move Marte in a deal for a starting pitcher, well, then you're looking at a scenario to where they're going to have to add another piece off the bench. So even though we are close to spring training, which I am so excited for because I can't even explain how desperate I am for this baseball season compared to most in the past. But either way, when you look at the Pete Alonso scenario or situation, whatever you want to call it, it's just getting to a point where there is so little time with still some things to do and a decision has to come. And I still feel the Mets should give a deadline for Pete Alonso and say, if you don't sign by then, we're going in another direction. Which is what I thought they were doing when we saw Martino drop that whole thing that they're pivoting to plan B after signing Jesse Winker. And then you see them get Minter and Stanek's now back. But then you have Martino just not even backtracking. He's just like being like, oh, looks like they're doing their pivot option and maybe bringing back Pete Alonso. Just admit you were wrong, man. But either way, I'm just trying to piece together here. Like, it's crazy that we still don't know the opening day roster right now come almost February because there's still so much that could be done. And Pete Alonso's, that whole thing is really what's holding everything up. It's been the case for a while now. So the guys that I mentioned before with Ryan Mountcastle, I think we'll start there because I do want to talk about uh, all these other options that could be on the radar for the Mets at first base. And by all the other options, I really think it's going to be two of them. And I think Spencer Torkelson and Ryan Mountcastle are the guys that you're really looking at that could come into play first base for the Mets next season. But, and this is the thing, yeah, there's no market for Pete Alonso. It's made up, and that's why I'm tired of hearing, we'll give him what he wants. That's when you become the Angels. That's when you become all these other garbage franchises, or what the Mets were with Billy Epler at the helm. And again, they made the playoffs, won 100-plus games. That is great. What did they do in the playoffs? How did next season go? But in terms of the pivot options, Ryan Mountcastle, let's start there because I do think he is an intriguing option considering the fact that he is a little bit restricted in terms of the power numbers because of how much Camden Yards has changed their dimensions in left field, which I think could open him up to be a 20 home run batter again because last season he had 13 home runs. And this was in 124 games too, so he is also getting less ABs than he's been in previous seasons where, you know, some of his better seasons he was getting 500 ABs, 534, and then 555. Last season only got 473 ABs. And you look at the numbers there, like I said, 13 home runs, 63 RBIs, 271 average, a 308 on base, which is definitely the concern there is the fact that he does chase a lot, but so does Pete Alonso. Slugging percentage at a 425, OPS at a 733, and I'm not comparing the two, by the way. I want to make that very clear. And OPS plus of 113. In terms of the career year, you are looking at a guy that had 33 home runs, near an 800 OPS, but again, the on-base stuff, not great with him. He was a little bit better in 2023 in terms of getting on base, which could be a little more intriguing. So, you know, in terms of the power numbers, you look at his 2021 season, but 2023, I mean, he was overall a better hitter because of the fact that he was getting on base more, not by a lot, but at least a little bit more. And again, I think Camden Yards does play a factor in the fact that you saw him below 20 home runs that season. So again, it is not a sexy option by any means, but in terms of a bridge to potentially get you to Vladimir Guerrero Jr., I'm not complaining because you also do have a safety option here because I do believe that Mountcastle's contract does not expire after the season. I believe there's one more year, either that or there's another year of arbitration, and then he is a free agent. So in terms of that, there's at least the safety net too, to where you could offer him something for arbitration. You lose out on Vlad next offseason. He's your first baseman going forward. If you get Vlad, then you move Mountcastle to maybe get some bullpen arms, whatever it may be down the road. So I'm definitely not against that idea. I think the other option is very intriguing in Spencer Torkelson, just because of the fact that I think there's more upside in terms of if you want someone with not just power, but in general. I mean, there is more upside being a former first overall pick as well, which doesn't mean as much in baseball compared to other sports. But either way, it does. It's a little intriguing just because of the fact that he did have 30 home runs, 31 that is, in 2023. And again, that's in a ballpark that is very difficult to hit in. And on top of that, if you look at what he did last season down the stretch, I mean, he was just absolutely unbelievable, which I want to get his numbers there because I remember at the start of the year, he was just flat out atrocious. And it was to the point where it was like, what the hell happened to Spencer Torkelson in terms of the numbers? But then if you go to the second half and you look at, his numbers, especially in August, he was playing a lot better baseball there. So he is intriguing in that regard where maybe there is upside there. I would prefer Mountcastle just because I don't think, because let's put it this way. If the Mets go in the direction of Torkelson, doesn't that profile with what they're going with either way in the regards of utilizing the younger talent, utilizing the younger guys to potentially replace the production of Pete Alonso, or at least try to replace Pete Alonso? You're just adding Torkelson into what we already have here at that point. And again, I do think there's more upside to Torkelson than like a Brett Beatty or some of these other guys. But at the same time, is that worth it when you could get Ryan Mountcastle, which at least you know what you're getting? And I get that Torkelson could be sick if he, hits 31 home runs and does what he did. I don't know if I'm saying that right, but if he could replicate what he did in 2023, that makes it intriguing, the option for sure. But the question is, will you get that from him? And even then, I mean, he was still league average for the most part. If you look at the numbers, slightly above league average. So again, it's an option. It's intriguing. And especially because there's a lot of control there on Spencer Torkelson. However, I don't know if that's the direction to me. I would rather Mountcastle. And I know fans don't want to hear it, but at some point, you can't wait around Pete Alonso. At some point, you're going to have to make a decision that you're either moving on from him or you're bringing him back. And it's getting to a point where I'm tired of the conversation. I think we all are. Just they need to get something done here. And if not, then they have to pivot elsewhere because it's getting ridiculous that we are almost in February and we still don't have a resolution here. So, yeah, in terms of the lineup without Pete Alonso, like I mentioned before, they brought Jesse Winker back, which I am absolutely a fan of, considering the fact that this team needed another left-handed bat. The only thing that does worry me, and the only thing that I could say, again, the only thing that worries me with this is, are you going to get enough power out of the DH spot between Winker and Marte, which is also why I would love for them to get an upgrade over Marte. I don't view Canna as a huge upgrade. I mean, I view him as an upgrade just because he could stay on the field, but I do for sure worry about that. But either way, I mean, with Jesse Winker, I do like I do like the bat there, and the thing that, of course, does make me feel a little bit differently about that in terms of, not getting the power is the fact that he does have a lot of good hitting tools that this team lacks throughout the rest of the lineup in terms of pitch selection and all that stuff. I mean, we talked about it at nauseum when the Mets first acquired him, and we talked about it throughout the video or live stream, whatever it was, when the Mets first brought Winker back. And we're familiar with him now at this point to where it's not worth doing a whole conversation. But if we want to look at the projected lineup according to Fangraphs, right now they have Lindor leading off, Soto hitting second, Vientos hitting third at first base, that is, Nemo hitting cleanup, Winker hitting fifth, Alvey hitting sixth, McNeil hitting seventh, vomit. And you have Siri batting eighth, and then Beatty at third and batting ninth. And then they also have it listed the platoon situation there to where Marte will obviously play for Winker. And then it says Acuna for Beatty, but I don't see Acuna playing third base. No shot in hell. The only thing they can maybe do is, shift Vientos back to third and then shift McNeil maybe over the first. I don't know how I feel about that, but I'd rather McNeil just not play. But either way, the point remains that I do think that it's obvious that they need to add another bat. It's very obvious that they need to add another bat. And, we'll see where that goes in terms of the Pete Alonso stuff or if they land one of these guys. I do want to look, though, at Mark Canha's numbers from last year because it's interesting that they offered him a deal, too. It's not like it was something where they've had conversations with them. Apparently, the rumor is they gave an offer to where I'm a little confused about that considering where do they fit him or where they see him fitting into their plans. And in terms of the things that you might like about Mark Canha, similar sort of deal as Jesse Winker in terms of the pitch selection and, a guy that's going to bring a little bit more stability for getting on base. But again, maybe it's just me, but I prefer a DH that provides more power. That's where I view a lot of it coming in from. And Mark Canha just does not provide that at all. And I think it's a little, I don't know. I'm on the fence because I get the idea of bringing in a guy, like I said, that has good pitch selection and all that stuff because this lineup needs it. However, I also, if you do lose Pete Alonso, and Soto's obviously going to make up for a lot of the power that's lost, I would still like a little bit more power in the lineup. That's just me, at least. I'm not entirely against bringing him back, but last year, I mean, he was not that great at all. The on base stuff was still good. He was still hitting, respectable batting average, if, for my batting average fans out there. But in terms of the power numbers, again, not a lot there with him. And the only other thing that I think they can maybe like about him is that he could play a couple of different positions. I mean, he could play first base, could play a couple different outfield spots, could be the DH, whatever they might want to do with him. That's really the only plus there with it. But I do find it interesting that they offered him a contract. It makes me question if there is something closer to being done with potentially a starting pitcher than we know, and in terms of the trade market, because that to me again would insinuate that starting Marte's out the door. To me, it doesn't make any sense to bring Mark Canha in if Marte isn't going anywhere. And I get that maybe you view Mark Canha as playing as a first baseman, and maybe he could play there. I'd rather get Mountcastle. And maybe there's something to be said about Mountcastle's asking price, maybe being a little too steep, but I'd rather just pay whatever the price may be. If it costs an extra back end, like lower ranked prospect, so be it. But we will segue in terms of, that sort of deal with the lineup and everything and talk about the starting pitching market because that's where it is very interesting because Pat Ragazzo did mention that not only are the Mets looking to add at first base, they are also looking to add a starting pitcher still. And that surprised me a little bit because I'm still very high on this rotation compared to most. And I thought They would be done with the starting pitching staff, barring the market crashing on maybe someone else that's available, or before they sign that, if they did become available. I thought that with Corbin Burns, as the offseason was going along, that maybe his market would crash and the Mets would get the pounce. That didn't happen, but I am very intrigued to see what they might do in terms of a starting pitcher, because if they're truly adding one, go get Michael King or Dylan Cease. And I prefer King over Cease personally. To me, I'm not complaining if you get either. It really, I guess, depends on the price at that point, which whoever's cheaper, go ahead and get them then, in terms of the prospects that have to go the other way. But I would definitely be a fan of either one of them. I mean, Dylan Cease finished fourth in Cy Young voting last year, and King finished seventh. You're talking about adding some quality arms. And the reason why I prefer King is because of the fact that I think that one, he could be very helpful for Clay Holmes as someone that did transition from a reliever to a starting pitcher this past year. And on top of that, I personally think that King was the better pitcher. I mean, he probably would have finished higher in the Cy Young voting if he didn't get off to a slow start to the season, because King, since he was a reliever last year, he got off to a little bit of a slower start going into the year here. Still put up disgusting numbers, by the way, despite struggling at the start of the season. The only thing that you can maybe argue you like Cease more is you maybe will get more innings out of him. But I would prefer King if possible, because of the fact that, again, I think that there is better, you know, I think there's less bullets used there as well. Not only just because of the fact that he is, actually, no, they are the same age. I thought Cease was a year older, but either way, I think that there's more bullets just because of the fact that that was his first year as a starting pitcher last year. So I think that maybe there is something to that as well. So I'm definitely intrigued by the idea of either. If not, there was also the rumor that maybe they'll go out and get Pavetta if his market crashes, but I'm fine with either. I'm fine with any of them because I'm already in a spot where I'm comfortable with the rotation compared to most. I think Clay Holmes is going to surprise people. I think he's going to be a dog for this rotation this year. I think that Shawn Manaea, give him the full year using that arm slot, he's going to be electric. The question that I have with Senga, of course, is health, but if he is healthy, then he's going to be good. And then you got Montas and Peterson, which that's fine for the back end of the rotation. But you add one more starter for the six-man rotation over Paul Blackburn. I mean, I would absolutely love that. And that only makes me feel even more confident with the rotation going into the year, especially bringing in another certainty at that. So whether it is King, whether it is Cease, I don't know what the price would be, but go ahead and get me either. Go ahead and get either. And funny enough, actually, I do want to pull this up because there was actually a very fair trade proposal presented by SNY. And funny enough, Zach Scott was the one that came up with the mock trade there. And I actually thought it was a very fair trade for both sides. So he's saying, and this was in terms of there was two different things. So one was the actual proposal they put together. The other was just, again, the base outline. So his general thinking, he said on Twitter, is one of Budo or McGill, which I would imagine Budo is probably more intriguing to a team just because of the fact that, one, he is younger. Two, I think that there's more to him as a starting pitcher versus Tyler McGill at this point. One of Gilbert or Clifford. I like Clifford more personally, but I'm fine with moving either if you're getting Cease or King. I mean, I'm not complaining. And then one prospect ranking 10 through 15 in the system. So the deal that he came up with in reality was Budo, Gilbert, Tong for Michael King. I would absolutely love that. And I'd be all for that because then you're talking as well. And if there is a world where Starling Marte goes out in this deal and the Mets pay down the salary, whatever it may be, and not the full thing, but pay down some of the salary, you bring in Michael King. Maybe you're talking about them adding another arm to the bullpen too. And I'm fine with the bullpen with where it is right now. Don't get me wrong, because if you get rid of Budo, it would suck. Don't get me wrong, it would really suck. But it wouldn't be the worst thing if you put Blackburn in the bullpen or you put Tyler McGill in the bullpen and you see what you got there. And then you got Diaz, Minter, Garrett, Stanek, and you still got guys like Canning, Young, Sean Reed Foley. Did I mention Reed Garrett before too? You still got him in the mix, obviously. But that's the only thing that would suck. But I'm doing this easily to go out and get either of these guys. And I get the risk that either of them could walk after this season and it would suck. But if this team wants to go in this year, then go in, go for it. Then go get Cease or King. To me, that's really what it depends on most of all is how committed is this team to winning this year. And either way, though, if they're talking about adding a starting pitcher in the offseason, I'd rather them just get it done now because come the trade deadline, I think either way, they're going to be in the market for a starting pitcher. So maybe the difference in price is what it is in terms of what you got to give up. But I would rather just get this done in the offseason if possible. And I think that it is possible. So I would love if they could find a way to get one of Cease or King. And again, even if it's Pivetta who they sign, which I think they'd have to give up draft compensation for, unfortunately. But that takes this rotation to another level, even though, again, I feel confident with the rotation as is. But I do find it interesting that Pat Ragazzo's words were that I want to read the exact line here in the article with what I'm referring to. So it's literally it's the last line of the article where he says, the Mets are trying to acquire a first baseman and a starting pitcher. Who those players might be is still in question, but there are multiple options currently on the table. It's almost February, and we still have this much with the offseason, which is crazy. I mean, there's still so many good names out there. Well, decent names, respectable names, whatever you want to say. Which I'm glad that starting pitcher, by the way, is not Max Scherzer. Go ahead and have at it in Toronto. Have at it because the Mets were scouting him. I just remember that because I'm looking at the article here from Pat Ragazzo. But in terms of the other stuff he mentioned, I do want to find what he was saying about King and Cease. Although he did say the Mets have also been talking to the Orioles about Mountcastle, with Baltimore looking for controllable arms. The Mets have guys like McGill and Budo who they could offer. I guess that's really where you gotta wonder, if they could get Mountcastle. A little bit bold, especially if you could move Budo in a deal to get a starting pitcher. And then in terms of the starting pitching front, he says starting pitcher Nick Pivetta is a name the Mets have liked and shown interest in this offseason. The righty has a qualifying offer attached to him, which would offset if Alonso leaves. So there's that to that. The Mets have been talking to the San Diego Padres about starters Dylan Cease and Michael King. Each hurler is a 1-year rental. The Braves have also shown interest, which would make me vomit if either went to the Braves. San Diego's asking price for Cease is set to be very high. For King, the Mets and Padres have discussed a top 10 to 15 prospect as well as a major league level starting pitching depth. No word if more would be included. I would love it if they just also went out and just extended King after getting him. I would love that as well. But we have seen obviously now from this offseason that it might not be in Stern's ML to go out there and give a lot of money to a starting pitcher, but maybe this is a scenario where it's different, where, maybe they think highly of Michael King and they want to go out there and get him and then keep him for the long haul. To me, it really will depend on what they give up to tell me if that's the plan. Because if they give up, because it said starting pitching depth on the roster, to me, if that's a guy like David Peterson, I feel like they are gonna try their best then to extend him because that would be a little bit interesting. But they do have a lot of guys. I mean, maybe they want Paul Blackburn, the Padres, who I think is he a free agent after this year, which that could change that whole thing that I just thought of now. But if it's not that, then maybe Blackburn. I think Blackburn's actually, yeah, he's a free agent, but maybe they would want Blackburn plus Budo and then like a prospect on top of that. I mean, either way, I really don't care what the price is unless they want like Sprout in the deal. Then I would do it no matter the cost because again, I just want to see this team go in this year and have the expectations and show that they want to be World Series contender and World Series contenders. And again, that's with doing it the right way, where they're not overpaying Pete Alonso just because the fans say to and all that stuff. I would love them to go out because if they got King, you're talking about this rotation being Minaya, King, Senga, Holmes, Montas, Peterson. Your bullpen then would take a bit of a hit losing Budo, but again, maybe a sign a reliever. And the lineup I get, unless Alonso's back, fans aren't going to be happy. But there's still so much that can be done where my mind's in a pretzel of it's crazy that we're here going into February and we still don't have enough clarity with the roster compared to what we'd like to have in terms of that sort of deal because it just sucks. Again, it sucks that as fans we want to see what the roster is going to be, but at the same time, I'm not complaining if it gets better from having to play the waiting game. Trying to think if I missed anything else in terms of some of the topics to go over. I mean, I didn't even talk about really AJ Minter, who they added to the pen. And I know I went live for it, but obviously, since we last did a podcast, I didn't get to mention that they did add AJ Minter, which I'm a little worried, definitely with the hip injury for sure. But I do love the fact that there's clearly a lot of upside here in terms of him being a lethal back end of the bullpen type guy. At worst, he's a middle relief guy, and then he's overpaid at that point. But it's also 1 year deal with a opt out as well, so you're not tied up an absurd amount of money to him and all that stuff. I think he's going to be good though. I'm not too worried about the hip injury like most. I'm a little worried about it, but it's not a huge fear of mine just because of the fact that I think that I mean, we saw with David Peterson, he got the hip right and then things were okay with him this past season. And I do think Minter is a good enough pitcher to where he's going to rebound from that and it's going to be huge to have that in the bullpen. And I do wonder if they're still targeting someone else because they did bring Stanek back as well, which went live for that yesterday. I'm very happy about that, especially because you're looking at him more in that middle relief role versus, the back end role where he's getting those higher leverage outs late in games. And Stanek was a dog for this team in the playoffs. So I'm happy that he's back. I'd like to see them add still, and I said this yesterday, I'd like to see them add a Tim Hill or go and get a guy like David Robertson who's got reverse splits that are good, or bring back Brooks Raley, which again, it sucks that you're gonna have to wait till July or August for him to potentially be available for you. But I would be a huge fan if they went in any of those directions, depending on the price, of course, because as we've seen, and I agree with the standpoint, you don't want to overpay for these relief pitchers. But yeah, I'm very intrigued to see where things go with this offseason. going forward here, as we are very close to pitchers and catchers, and I cannot wait for this season to start already. I really can't. But that is going to be it for me. Thank you guys so much for tuning in and watching. Don't forget to leave a like if you haven't already. Don't forget to subscribe, turn on your notifications so you know when I upload or go live on the channel. And I'll see you guys in the next one.